When Xavi took charge of Barcelona, they were in 9th place after 11 games. Lionel Messi was gone and they were in real financial trouble. And now, Lionel Messi is still gone. They are still in real financial trouble, but they've won the league! So, Barcelona are back. Or are they? And how did Xavi get his team to win the league despite all their trouble off of the pitch? Now, Joan Laporta was the president of Barcelona between 2003 and 2010, a very successful period for the club when they won many things. Then he left, and then he was re-elected in 2022 and started going about trying to fix the dire financial situation that they are in. He did this in a few ways, by pulling various economic levers, doing things like selling 25% of their La Liga TV rights to a US private equity group for 25 years, then agreeing a new sponsorship deal with Spotify, so they had Spotify across the shirt, but also the Camp Nou was changed to being the Spotify Camp Nou, then getting players to renegotiate cheaper contracts to try and reduce the wage bill, trying to get underneath the budget they had to be for financial fair play reasons. Lionel Messi had to leave, and even this season, Xavi, one of their best young players, one of their best players, has had to go from wearing the number 6 shirt to the number 30, because he's had to be registered as a youth player because of a legal dispute between La Liga and Barcelona, and therefore he's not allowed to have the contract they agreed with him last year. Basically, Barcelona were where once there was lots of money in the banana stand, now there was no longer any money in the banana stand. And so another thing they did was get rid of a bunch of players to try and improve their financial situation. So out went a heap of really expensive players on big wages. Players like Coutinho, Aubameyang went, Memphis Depay went for €4 million to Atletico Madrid. He's one of their most important players the season before, a huge wage man. A huge wage man! They could then bring in players because of the way they changed their financial situation. So in came Rafinha from Leeds for a bit of money, Jules Koundé, who they couldn't register for a long time, Lewandowski, a huge signing, Frank Kessié, more of a he was available for free, so you might as well sign him kind of deal, and then Christensen, Bellerin and Alonso, these guys all came in on a free. So Xavi then had his squad, and he then had to turn that into a winning team that could compete in the Champions League and in La Liga and all the competitions basically. And it looks unsurprisingly like a 4-3-3, the very traditional Barcelona way, but there's lots of variances to it, and it's been because of necessity, because of the players they've got. For example, there's no actual right back in the team. They don't really have it in a single squad. Sergio Roberto has played there in the past, but he's not one of those. Araujo and Koundé can both do it. Koundé's ended up being the right back. That's one of the things they've got with his back four. Alejandro Balde has come up from Barcelona B, progressed into the first team. He is now really important as basically a left winger. So he gets really high and wide up to this wing here, which means that Xavi can play inside the pitch, more like this position, and then Dembélé can come inside from this right wing, but Pedri pushes forward, Lewandowski goes up top like this, and then what you get is a box midfield. So you can turn this back four into a back three like this, and then you've got these guys here. So you can then get Pedri, Xavi, De Jong and Busquets all in the same team. And as you'd expect of a Barcelona manager, Xavi wants to keep control of the ball. He wants to have possession and use it the way he wants. And he does this on the pitch by creating loads of width. You'll have a player hugging touchline, Balde at the moment, and then you'll have Dembélé or Rafinha on the wide right, stretching the opposition defence so that you then have space between opposition players to be able to thread passes through. Then you can get players like Pedri and Xavi in these half spaces, and they can attack either side of the central striker, so you can get chances created from wide areas, but mostly you want to thread it into these central areas. And when they get into central areas, they'll mostly combine short blocks together, kind of squeeze in. And so they'll go from very big and wide in possession, like an accordion nice and big, and they'll squeeze into nice and small on one part of the pitch. Because there's a little tactic that Xavi uses in his team that lots of other Barcelona managers have used, loads of managers around the world do, where you squeeze your pitch over here, and then you can switch the ball over to someone who's isolated on the other side of the pitch. Because naturally, if you're nice and big and wide, then you squeeze into this bit here, the opposition defense is going to squeeze as well to make sure they restrict the space. So you can't just fire through balls into these sorts of players, like Pedri and Xavi dancing around is bad. And then other ways to create space like this is to have players like Lewandowski make a counter movement. He might drop in, which then frees up space for Xavi to go. If Lewandowski drops in, the centre back might drop in with him, which then means Xavi goes in behind him. Then you suddenly create these sort of spaces. But say a player like Xavi or maybe even Balde on this left side, what they often do is they'll make runs in behind knowing they're not going to get the ball because it forces the opposition defence back, which then creates space. So for example, if we get Balde here and he's playing wide left with this defence here, he might suddenly make a run in behind, and this right back might then drop to try and stop the pass coming in from Frenkie de Jong over the top. So they'll drop back like that. And by dropping back like this, you then create a tiny bit of space between these two lines, which then means someone like Lewandowski might have a bit of space here, to be able to receive the pass inside, or you might get Pedri can then move into this space here, so when the ball does come through within that second touch, he might be able to get on the ball. Everything they do is designed to create space for someone to play into. That's what they do. They create it with width, they create it with loads of movement off the ball, loads of movement off the ball, positional rotations, playing in diamonds, and with subtle movements off the ball. That's what they do. And you can kind of see all of this in like one screen grab here, right? So you've got the width, trying to make sure the pitch is nice and big. You've got players focused on one side. This is Busquets, who's always in the center of the midfield, but he pulls over to the ball side every single time. Here he is on the ball here. Lots of players squished together. Real Betis naturally want to try and like squeeze in to try and make sure they're not leaving space. But then because they've done this, you can see that Jules Koundé, the right back, is pushed up. He's isolated over here. Then you've got Rafinha, makes an out to in run. And if he makes this run and the ball doesn't come, what will happen is the defence will drop back with him, which will create space in here, which Pedri can then move into, or it might then just create even more space for him over here. Everything's about for space. In this example, Busquets spreads an amazing ball through here for Rafinha. He gets in behind and they end up scoring. But Xavi's not married to only keeping the ball and only doing that sort of thing. He will happily do anything to exploit space. And of course, in transition, that's very, very useful. So if you can bring a team trying to attack you and they leave space in behind, whereas some Barcelona managers will just make yourself pass and get back into your attacking structure, Xavi's Barcelona will get the ball forward quickly through the lines to try and attack where there is space. And you'll see a lot of games they play, they'll have a lot of control for a lot of periods of games, and then they'll just try and turn games into basketball matches where it'll go from end to end. And the 2-1 win over Real Madrid earlier in the season, the one that really got them over the line in the title race, is a good example of this. They had big control of the game for long periods of time, but then at certain parts it turned into this end-to-end game, which is good to create chances, but not good for control of the match. And sure enough, Real Madrid, I think, had a goal disallowed, and then Barcelona managed to go up the other end and score. And it's in a transitional moment where Real Madrid have gone on a counter-attack, they lose the ball, and then suddenly Barcelona are able to break. Balde underlaps Lewandowski, who pulls out wide. Lewandowski plays the ball to Balde, who then sets up Franck Kessié, the midfielder, to score inside the box. And that's how they end up getting a 2-1 win over Real Madrid by exploiting a transitional moment. Xavi's Barcelona are a lot more similar to Luis Enrique's Barcelona than they are to Guardiola's one. It's a slightly more modern version of it, with its box midfield especially. And when you have control of games, you can then make sure you don't concede goals, because leagues are won on your defensive numbers. And look at Xavi's. They're pretty good. They're the best they've been in years, especially Marc-Andre ter Stegen's goalkeeper numbers. He is well outperforming what he should be. He's been really important this season for Barcelona. His clean sheet rate is pretty nuts actually over here. This is what you've got. Now that's the back end of the pitch. The front end of the pitch is where all the fun is, and nobody has won more high turnovers in La Liga this season than Barcelona. Only Real Sociedad have a better PPDA, passes per defensive action, in the league. You can see where they're winning the ball back, and these yellow ones are really important, these little numbers, because these are shot-ending possession regains. They're winning the ball high up the pitch, so that's stopping the opposition from attacking them early, but it also means they're creating chances. When you build up with a controlled structure, the opposition can get back into their defensive structure and make it very difficult to create chances. And so if you can't create chances through playmaking, you can do it through pressing. And Xavi's Barcelona are very good at that. So there's a lot of structure in Xavi's Barcelona, lots of structure and rigid automation in build-up. They get to the middle third of the pitch, and suddenly the players are given a lot more freedom of thought where they can make their own decisions. And when you have players like Lionel Messi, this is great. Andres Iniesta, Xavi himself, these were all great Barcelona players who had freedom of thought to do things as they pleased. But if you don't have that sort of player, it becomes more difficult. And we see this in Barcelona, Xavi's Barcelona, with Pedri, because with him, they're really good and they create chances and they're amazing. Without him, they're not the same team. Here are his numbers, look. Without Pedri, they only win 42% of the games, or last season. This season, similar story. So when he plays, even if it's as a substitute, they have a better record of winning games. They score more goals, they're just better defensively, they keep the ball better. But why is Pedri so important? What does he do? It's all about decision making. So if you have a team and they're squashed into this, like a deep block like this, right? And you're Barcelona and you've got your width, you're trying to stretch them, but they're not giving you any space and you can't get the ball in behind. Some players might try and force a pass through. And you force the pass through, it's blocked, then this team can break and you're in trouble because they can break against you. But what Pedri does whenever he plays is make the right decision. He'll look, he'll spot a through pass, but it's not quite right. So he'll play it short, then move into space to make sure he gets it back eventually. He might then look again, he sees his through ball here, but it's not quite right because he's got a good run on him, so he turns back again and he pauses the game. It's la pausa. It's this thing in Spanish football about lowering and heightening the tempo of the game. Pedri is in charge of everything. He can play it from deep, he can play it as a number 10. He does everything you want as a playmaker and controls and dictates what Barcelona are doing. And without him in there, what they often do is rush it. So they'll put the ball out wide too early to someone like Dembele, who will then put a ball in too early, and they won't have players in position for it. They lose possession and they can break against them. We saw this a lot in the Man United versus Barcelona Europa League games this season, where they just weren't able to control the ball as much as they wanted to. They were rushing decisions. Players like Dembele, Rafinha is really frustrating to watch sometimes when he plays. He'll often get a first-time ball in and punt it into the box and it goes wide. These are the things that can often lead to chances created, but more often than not makes you lose possession. Whereas Pedri does not do that. And on top of controlling and dictating play, Pedri is also amazing at creating chances himself. Now, a lot of Xavi's play, as you'd expect, a lot of the chances created come from the wide players. Pedri plays through the middle, and his expected assists in all competitions, according to FBref, 6.1, only 1 assist. So either strikers are missing their chances, or perhaps the chances aren't of huge value. But he's creating lots of chances. He is one of their most important players creatively, and this is from far fewer games than players who are around him as well. Basically, Pedri is fundamentally vital to how Barcelona play. He is their Lionel Messi and their Xavi and their Iniesta all at once. And so when he doesn't play, they're not as good. But bottom of this list, you will see is Sergio Busquets, who is one of the most wonderful tactical defensive midfielders you'll have ever seen play. He's going to leave Barcelona at the end of the season and go somewhere else. And that is the last of the Pep Guardiola players. So that era of Barcelona, that generation, is now done. We're into the Xavi era fully. So he's announced he's going to leave the club at the end of the season. What does that mean for the future of Barcelona? How do you replace the irreplaceable? Now, Busquets has been in this number 6 position at the club for years and years and years, basically doing the Guardiola role under Guardiola, playing alongside Xavi, and now they've got to find a way to replace him. So the option obviously might be Frenkie de Jong dropping into this slot here, which means he will not be sold in the summer if that's what they do. And then you've got to try and find a player who drops in here. Maybe Gavi comes inside here. And if you still have Balde going up and down here, there might be room for a right-footed inside forward coming in here, if they can then sign a new player, because they still have huge financial trouble. Because as Javier Tebas, the president of La Liga, he was speaking at a business of football event in London quite recently, he says Barcelona has been involved in questionable behaviour which has had an impact on La Liga, and we are acting accordingly. We have ruled that they can no longer sign more players. So this summer is going to be very difficult. But why? Well, it's because they have to drop spending on wages and transfers from 650 million euros, that's a lot, to 450 million euros. Now, those of you who are also good at maths will know that that is 200 million euros of difference, and that's what Barcelona have to make up. But crucially, they have to sell players to do this, and for every amount they raise in sales, they can spend only 40% of that. So whatever they end up selling and making room for in the summer, they can then only really spend 40% of that to get back in. So Barcelona made all those big risks in the summer. They sold lots of players, got rid of people off the wage budget, and they sold their economic rights to certain people for a certain amount of time to try and raise capital immediately. But they're going to have a similar problem in the summer. They have to sell players, get players off the wage bill in order to keep improving the squad. Because as we saw in the Champions League, they were good in La Liga, but they're not quite there in Europe, and they were taken apart by Bayern Munich twice, and Inter Milan held them. Now, they need to improve in the summer. They can get better and change with new players coming in. If Lionel Messi were to be available, that can make a big difference in their attacking numbers and how they create, and not have to rely on Pedri so much. But there's going to have to be a lot more movement in the summer to take them to the next step. But under Xavi, they've got clear structure, it's working very well, and they could well be back on the up if they can solve all the other stuff off the pitch. On the pitch, it's fine. And now they've won the league!
If you like this video, please consider subscribing to the channel. The Athletic is home to some of the world's best sports journalists, including journalists dedicated to each Premier League team, so every fan gets the coverage they deserve, not just the big clubs. And you can try it for free now for 30 days. See the link in the description.